Welcome everyone. My name is Brent Wilkins. I'm the volunteer coordinator here at Jesse Jones Park. Normally I'm not facilitating education programs like this. I'm generally just in charge of the volunteers, but I have a kind of a passion for monarch conservation, and I worked for a botanic garden and a wildlife refuge before this in Oklahoma, where we had a lot of monarchs come through. And so I'm really passionate about it, and that's why I'm glad that we have Jennifer Godwin-Wyer here today. Jennifer is the director of the Monarch Project Education Initiative and the Godwin-Wyer Science Scholarship Fund, which are part of the Spring Creek Education Society. They provide education programs for K through 12 students, internships for grades 9 through 12, and an annual scholarship. She's a retired geologist, received her degree at UNC Chapel Hill, and at Duke University she worked in nuclear physics and has contributed to multiple peer-reviewed publications. She's also the gifted youth leader for the Gulf Coast Mensa chapter, where she leads various gifted youth programs, and her Gulf Coast Mensa Kids Monarch Project was recognized by several organizations for their work in citizen science and monarch monitoring. She's also a speaker at local schools, teaches geology labs to Parkway Elementary students, and is a contracted writer and evaluator for Studies Weekly. So welcome, Jennifer. We're glad to have you. This is our second year to do this Monarch and Milkweed program, and we're excited to learn everything about monarchs and milkweed.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me back. It was fun last year, so I hope it'll be fun again this year over Zoom instead of in public. So I will go ahead and get started. The presentation should take about 35-40 minutes total, because I'm going to just go over everything about monarch butterflies and the caterpillars. We'll talk about milkweed. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about, what to do in your garden, what type of milkweed to plant, the nectar plants, things like that. So if you have any questions while I'm going through, feel free, jump on in, ask them, and I will go ahead and get started. So the first thing I like to talk about is the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, because it's really interesting if you have your own garden and you've seen the egg develop into the different instars of caterpillars, into a chrysalis, into an adult monarch butterfly. Each has an approximate period of how long it takes for each stage of development. What happens, I'll use my cursor, of course, the monarch lays an egg. Monarch butterflies will only lay eggs on milkweed, and that is why it's so important to plant milkweed in your garden. A lot of, with climate change and the destruction of fields for use for agriculture have destroyed this very important plant, and so it's helped in the decline of the monarch butterfly population, because there's not a lot of milkweed along their migratory pathways. And so that's why there's a big push by several organizations, plant milkweed, it's really needed. So as you can see, the egg is very, very tiny. It's usually white or cream colored. But right before the caterpillar hatches, it'll darken. And so that when it darkens, a baby caterpillar is about to pop out, and here is one. It's very, very tiny and cute. The caterpillar is called a larva. That's the stage that it's in, and it goes through 5 different molting stages, which are called instars. And so each time I'll just say sheds its skin, it molts its exoskeleton. It will get bigger, and its antenna will get longer, and it goes through, it starts from a first instar to a second, to a third, to a fourth, and then finally to the 5th, which is this big guy here. And once you see one of the really big caterpillars with the very long antennae, they're old enough to get ready to go into chrysalis stage. And what happens is that they will find a place that they like. They will form a little button at the top. They will hang upside down in this J formation. And then they'll stay like that for about 2 to 3 days. And then you'll start, if you're lucky enough to see one actually create a chrysalis. I've got a really good video of one on our monarchpei.org website if you want to see it actually happen in real time. But this is the chrysalis stage. And then, of course, the adult butterfly will hatch out, and then the life cycle starts again. So for the life cycle, the egg is usually 3 to 4 days before the first instar caterpillar pops out. And then for its entirety, from the baby to the big caterpillar, it's about 2 weeks. And then it will stay in chrysalis for about another 10 to 2 weeks, but it depends on temperature. The warmer the temperature, the less time it will stay in the chrysalis or the pupa phase. So generally around our area, expect the chrysalis to stay for about 9 to 10 days before the adult butterfly will hatch. And then adult monarch butterflies usually live 2 to 6 weeks. There is a super generation, which is actually the generation that is now coming through our area for the fall migration. They can live up to 9 months because they're the ones that fly from the northern summer sites down into Mexico for their wintering sites. And then they stay there until it's time to come back up in the spring. Does anybody have any questions about the life cycle or anything at all? Okay. So when I was talking about instars, the egg, and then the first instar is that baby caterpillar, and then you can see how this is the second, and you can see how with each molting phase they grow. And the longer the antennae, that's usually how it helps you to determine what instar stage that they're in, because a fourth and a fifth can sometimes look very similar in size to each other, but the length of the antennae is what's going to tell you which instar it is. Okay, and here are some pictures from my personal way station. I have got one on my property, and then we also monitor the one at Dennis Johnston Park. But this is the one from my property, and so I wanted to show you guys what, you know, the different instar stages and the eggs look like.
Hey, Jennifer.
Yes.
We do have a question here from one of our guests. What triggers the super generation to live so much longer than the others? It's a good question.
No, that's a very good question, and they don't know. It's just they do know that the super generation has a higher metabolism. They have stronger muscles in their wings, and they're able to travel longer distances. But the reason why, nobody knows. They just know that the fall migration monarchs are the ones that are the super generation ones, because they actually travel the entire 3,000 plus miles down to Mexico. Whereas the spring migration ones, we usually get the first generation monarchs here in our area because we're basically the first stop for the monarchs when they come up from Mexico, and they egg dump in our area, and then you see a whole bunch of first generation butterflies emerge, and those are the ones that live about 2 to 6 weeks. And so, you know, they'll migrate a little bit farther north, lay more eggs. That's the second generation emerges, they migrate, but then the super generation is the one that makes the big long journey all by themselves back down to Mexico.
Maybe more research needs to be done. Monarch butterflies are just incredible insects. They're just phenomenal to learn about.
Here's some more pictures from my way station. Here is a mating pair, if you're very lucky to see mating pairs. I haven't seen many this year. Last year I had tons. And I get lots of chrysalis formation along my house. So I have to be very careful to make sure when we mow the lawn and everything, because sometimes they'll make the chrysalis like really low next to the grass line and the brick. And then here's one that has recently emerged, and there's its chrysalis that it came out of. And what happens when the butterfly emerges is that it looks like it's got a really fat abdomen, and then its wings are all crinkled. If you ever find one, don't touch it, because what it needs to do is it needs to get that blood flowing into its wings, and it needs to dry out. And if that process is messed up in any way, it can deform the wings and they won't be able to fly properly. I had one accidentally fall onto the ground and not be able to crawl up on something. And so just with its contact with the grass for a few minutes, it caused its wing to fold in and it wasn't able to spread it out properly. So whenever you see a newly emerged monarch, just please be mindful and let it do its thing so that it's able to, fly and not have a damaged wing. Monarch butterflies migrate every year, just like birds do. Their path of migration depends on the species. There are several different species of monarch butterfly. The ones that we get in our area are the eastern monarchs, but we also get queen monarchs and soldier monarchs. They look a little bit different. The undersides of the queens and soldiers look very similar to the monarch that we're used to. But if you look at the front side, the wing pattern is a little bit different. So that's how you can differentiate. There is also a western species of monarch, and those are in drastic decline, unfortunately. The Xerxes Foundation does a lot of research in the western. I won't really talk about them in our presentation because, we only get the eastern here. But just know that both populations, the eastern and the western monarchs, the populations have been declining every year. The western is in very critical state right now. So here are the migratory paths. As you can see, they're overwintering sites in the Oyamel fir forest trees in Mexico. And in the spring, we usually start seeing the monarchs appear. I have seen it as early as late February, but then I have seen it as late as mid-April. And so it just depends on the climate and the weather that's happening overwintering. If it's a really warm winter down in Mexico, they tend to leave earlier, which can become a problem. I think a couple of years that happened when they left their overwintering sites a little early and it was still really cold in our area and the milkweed hadn't come up. There were no nectar plants for them to get food, and they basically stalled out here in the breadbasket of America and the Midwest, and a lot of the population died because it was just too cold and there wasn't any resources for them to lay eggs on or to eat. And usually, if you can see, we're right in the spring migration path. What's happening now, the fall migration, they tend to migrate a little bit west of us, more towards Austin, San Antonio. So we will see them here for the fall migration, but just not in as great a number as you would see a little bit further west of us. We've had a lot of sightings. If you take a look at the map on the right, this is the peak migration that's happening right now. And as you can tell, everything's a little bit west of us. So that's where the most are being found right now.
Hey, Jennifer.
Yes, sir.
Back on that last slide.
Yes.
It looks like the eastern and western populations both overwinter in about the same area? Is that right? I mean, do they
No,
mix?
the western overwinters in Southern California,
So am
in
I?
this area. And so the eastern, there are some westerns that do make it down
Uh-huh.
to Mexico, but the bulk of them overwinter in Southern California.
Okay. All right.
And then what's really interesting, since we're back on this slide, with with the rising temperatures with global warming, there now have been overwintering sites spotted in Florida, but also they're starting to pop up in Texas. Galveston Island, I've been reporting to Journey North. Whenever I go down to Galveston Island during the winter, I will see overwintering, a small little overwintering population near Moody Gardens, because they've got this big butterfly botanical garden near the pyramids. And it's really interesting. So if you ever want to see some overwintering monarchs, pop down to Galveston on a nice sunny day during the winter, and you might be able to see the little populations that are now starting to pop up in our state. Instead of continuing their migration to Mexico, they're stopping. As you can see, this is a really sad graph I'm about to show you. This is how the monarch butterfly population has declined over time. If you look at 2013 and 2014, the numbers were very, very low. With conservation efforts, planting of milkweed, getting out, educating the public about it, things have started to rebound. We had a really good year, the 2018, 2019 overwinter population, but then you can see it drops back down again. Don't know why yet. So they're still trying to figure that out. How do they calculate how many butterflies are overwintering in the trees in Mexico? They do an estimate. They take a look at what is called a hectare. If you're wondering what in the heck is a hectare, it's down here. 1 hectare is about 0.004 square miles. And so they know approximately how many butterflies can fit within 1 hectare. And so then they see how many hectares there are with the butterflies overwintering in the trees, and then they kind of calculate and do an estimation. So from last year, the population declined another about 34% from where it was. Okay, so why are monarchs in decline? Well, one, the obvious reason, warmer climates are causing the migration patterns to occur earlier or to occur later. The higher instances of the severe weather and droughts can affect their food sources. Are things flowering? Their nectar plants, are they flowering when they're supposed to be? Hurricane Harvey did a number on the monarchs, and we were finding a lot of monarchs displaced, lots of broken, tattered wings after Hurricane Harvey went through. The loss of habitat is a really big one, especially in the agricultural belt where we have a lot of the farming in the Midwest. There's been a lot of deforestation in Mexico. The monarchs only I shouldn't say that, because we're finding the little overwintering sites now in Florida and Texas, but in Mexico, they overwinter in Oyamel fir forest trees. And so if those are cut down, then their overwintering, habitats are messed up, and that affects their population as well. The creation of pocket habitats in urban areas. What exactly is a pocket habitat? Well, in cities like Houston, people have gardens, people, put out plants. And so there's not an expanse of milkweed and nectar sources that you would, normally have if you were just in the open wild. And so the monarchs are having to, flit all around trying to find, plants to eat from and plants to lay eggs on in these little pocket habitats. The planting of genetically modified crops is really big, and in the corn belt we have a lot of corn bean belt, and milkweed is being destroyed because to farmers it's a weed. Milkweed is also, it's got toxins in it, so if cows or other farm animals eat it, they can get very sick, and so a lot of times the milkweed is destroyed. Pesticide use is really big, and of course disease can also affect monarchs. If you ever buy milkweed from a garden center, please ask and make sure that they are selling you pesticide-free milkweed. Any pesticide on the leaves, or if they sprayed the plants in any way, the caterpillars eat those leaves, they will absorb the pesticides and they will die once they eat them. I don't, Houston garden centers is kind of big with they get pesticide milkweed in. I know that Plants for All Seasons, I think there are 2 locations here, they sell pesticide-free milkweed. But just if you ever go in, make sure to ask. Okay, so why is it important? I mean, what's the big deal about monarch butterflies? Why is it so important that we conserve them? They are a very beneficial pollinator, along with bees and hummingbirds and other pollinating insects. Without pollinators, we wouldn't have, food to eat, crops. We rely on these pollinators to pollinate the crops so that we have, apples and corn and lots of fruits and vegetables and everything in between. Monarchs also serve as like an environmental indicator for other pollinator species. So if you see a decline in one pollinator species, you know that there's something going on in that area. They help maintain the ecosystem's biodiversity. They're part of nature's food web. Everything is interconnected. If something happens to any part of the food web, it affects everything else in the environment. The habitats that monarchs rely on support other species. So like I said, you affect one, you affect the other. Monarchs are an excellent educational tool to use to study life cycles, to study how animals can metamorphose. Also migratory pathways, because instead of learning about bird migratory pathways, learn about monarch migratory pathways. And they're also just a very iconic symbol. Everybody knows what a monarch butterfly looks like. It's just, a beautiful insect. Okay, so do we have any questions about butterflies in general before I hop on into the milkweed part? And Brent, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, actually, I just thought of something. All migratory birds in the United States are federally protected, but are there any protections for monarch butterflies?
They've been trying to get the monarch listed as an endangered species. I will need to look up. I haven't looked up this year. I know that there was something that happened. Let me look it up and get back about that. I don't think that they're listed this year, but they have been trying to get them protected.
Just looking at the numbers on your graph, I mean, it looks like they need to do something soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the bounce back, that kind of hurt a little bit. The bounce back of a couple of years ago, it went above the levels that they were willing to consider. But let me make a note and I'll check it to see what they've done recently.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So milkweed. Milkweed is extremely important. It is the only plant that the monarch butterfly will lay its eggs on. There are tons of different species of milkweed. So we'll go over a few that are native just to our area because, you know, milkweed varies depending on where it grows. Milkweed is considered a weed, and so people destroy it without really realizing what it is. And so it's important, you know, so if you ever see anything that looks like a milkweed, try not to, you know, pull it up or mow it down or cut it before, you know, finding out if it really is, because if it is, you know, let it stay. With my way station on my property, when the seeds come out and they start flying around, I just, you know, of course I collect them, but then I let the others just fly as they will. And if they start growing somewhere in the middle of the yard, I let them be, I let them grow. Milkweed does contain a toxin. If you ever break apart a leaf or pull off a stem, you'll see this kind of like milky white substance start leaking out of it. It is a cardinalide. And just to let you know, some people do react to this, so you have to be kind of err on caution if you're handling milkweed. My husband is kind of allergic to it, so if he ever touches the plant or he gets that milky white sap on his hands, he breaks out in a rash, whereas I can touch it and I don't. So you kind of have to, you know, be very careful if you're going to touch a milkweed plant, just to make sure. Monarchs have evolved over time to be tolerant of this toxin that is in the leaves, but in doing so, it has helped protect them, because when the caterpillars eat the leaves, the caterpillars absorb that toxin. And then when they go into chrysalis and become the adult monarch butterfly, that monarch butterfly retains the toxins, and so it helps protect them from predators, because predators don't want to eat them. They taste yucky. They, you know, they'll make them sick because of the, you know, the toxins that are in the butterfly. And also, milkweed has a very deep root system. If you ever pull one out of the ground, its roots are very, very long. And so they're an excellent plant to use for soil stabilization. We use them at Dennis Johnston Park along, we've got this kind of little ditch that tends to flood a lot when it rains very heavily. And in order to stabilize the sides, we've planted milkweed plants along the banks. We have planted them all along the parking lot where it edges up to the garden as well, in order to help absorb rainwater, so that, you know, it's kind of like a flood prevention thing for us. Okay, so a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference between native and non-native milkweed? Well, when things are native to your area, to the ecosystem, it means that they naturally grow there. They're adapted to the climate, they're adapted to the soil conditions. And so when you bring in something that's non-native, it might not do as well, or it might explode and take over, and that's when you get an invasive species that kind of takes over and it shoves out all the other native species, and it's not good. So there is a big debate about, you know, whether to plant native or non-native milkweed in our area. The reason being is that tropical milkweed, the milkweed that you're usually used to seeing around, is not native to our area, but it has a higher concentration of the toxins in it. And so the monarchs actually prefer it over the native ones, which have a lesser concentration of toxins, because you want your babies, you want your caterpillars to have the best chance of survival. And so are you going to choose one that's going to make them more toxic, or one that's less toxic to predators? Well, you want the more toxic so that it helps protect them from predators. So if you ever plant different species of milkweed and you have tropical in your garden, the monarchs are probably going to prefer that tropical. So try to plant things. I'll let Brent show you like antelope horn, swamp milkweed, zyzotes. I'll show you all of those in a minute. But Brent, did you want
to? We do have a question.
Yes.
Danielle is asking, does the toxin from the milkweed affect any of the neighboring plants in your garden?
No. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do anything, honestly. It's just, you know, if you've never handled milkweed before, and you may be an allergic type person like my husband is, you just want to be careful. I usually, with all my interns and myself included, we wear gloves, you know, nitrile gloves or garden gloves whenever we're handling milkweed, just to make sure. You know, that we're not going to have an allergic reaction to it, but it's not going to hurt anything in your garden.
And I was just going to comment on native versus non-native. Personally, I'm pretty critical of non-native, and a big part of that is I was on an invasive plant task force with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where all I did was remove invasive plants all day, every day, and you know, from what we know about some things that we introduced, like kudzu in the south, taking over. Of course, tropical milkweed, I don't think it's going to become invasive. But you know, to me, if native is available, you know, I try and go with that. But one thing I've realized, and if y'all watch those, there's a couple of YouTube videos linked on this slide, and I'll send out this PowerPoint to everyone afterwards. Growing and propagating native milkweed can be kind of tricky. The tropical milkweed grows a lot, seems to grow easier and faster and bigger. And so we did a little experiment where we took a few different species of native milkweed and tried growing them in our greenhouse. And one of the species didn't germinate at all. The other one we kind of got mixed results with. And tropical, you know, is almost always going to grow, it seems like. So that's kind of changed my mindset a little bit. I mean, I still love natives, and if you can get natives, you know, plant those.
Have a good one.
What's that? Oh, okay. I thought I heard a question. Just a little plug-in, the milkweed that we have been growing, the volunteers have been growing in our greenhouse over the last few months. We'll be having a plant sale at the park on November 13th at our Pioneer Day Festival from 10 to 4. So if y'all are looking for some milkweed plants, I know fall, most people don't plant in the fall, but you get those roots in the ground, in the spring, it'll just pop right up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, November 13th. So stop by and see us.
Yep. Did you want to show them the ones behind you?
Oh yes, I brought a couple examples of what we've been growing. And I don't know, can y'all see my video right now? Okay. So right here, this little one here is a swamp milkweed. It's a native milkweed that we planted in late June. So you can kind of see about the size of it right now. It's been in the greenhouse. Right next to it, this is a tropical milkweed that we planted in late August. So 2 months later, and you can see, of course, there's multiple plants in here. There's more than one seed, but you can see that the stalks are larger and fuller. So it grows really well here. But Jennifer will probably tell you know, if you plant tropical, in November, is it late November or so, you want to cut it down.
Yeah, if you already have milkweed plants, make sure to cut them down to about this high from the ground in late November. I usually say late November because we, in our area, because it stays so warm, you know, through winter, we have stragglers coming down, still on their way to Mexico. And so I usually kind of wait, let them have enough time to lay eggs and have the caterpillars, you know, go into chrysalis. And so usually late November, if you have milkweed plants, cut them down to about this high off the ground. Trust me, nothing's going to kill them. It's going to come back. It doesn't matter how, you know, last year with our horrible freeze, everything came back, all the milkweed came back. So it's not, nothing's going to kill them. It's going to come back. They're perennial. They'll keep regrowing, and it's amazing how fast that they grow once those shoots come out, and then you're going to have like a 5-foot plant by late spring, early summer. It's amazing.
And cutting it down helps to kind of keep the monarchs migrating, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
also it helps to reduce the OE parasite that could, if it's on the plant, it could kind of keeps it in control.
Yeah, so I guess I need to talk a little bit about OE. Houston, our area, is huge for this parasite. I'm not even going to say its scientific name because it's just way too long. It's called OE. And it's a parasite that infects monarch butterflies. And it's just, we have it everywhere here. If it ever gets in your garden, you have to cut all your plants back, period. You just have to. You have to destroy everything because it's just so pervasive. And what happens is that the parasite, it does its little life cycle inside the gut of a monarch butterfly, and then its spores will attach to the abdomen of the monarch butterfly. So as the monarch goes from milkweed to milkweed, and you know, it lands to lay its eggs, or it lands to nectar from the flowers, those spores, those OE spores, will slough off and get all over the plant. And so what do you think the caterpillar is going to eat once it emerges? It's going to eat the spores along, you know, as it's eating the leaves of the milkweed plant. And that's how it just keeps going. And what OE does is that it can deform a monarch's wings. It can turn them into like this, you'll see like this ashen gray coloration, streaks sometimes, folded, deformed wings. Sometimes they don't even make it out of chrysalis. If they do and they're able to fly, they're very weak. They can't fly the distance that they need to on their journey. And it's just really decimated the monarch population down here. And so if you ever get it and your milkweed, you just have to cut it all down. Cut it all, even if there are caterpillars on it, the caterpillars are infected, just cut it down.
We have a good question here. How do you know if you have OE parasite on your milkweed?
See, now that's the big question. If you start having a lot of deformed, if you start seeing a lot of deformed adult monarch butterflies, or the discoloration, you know. Otherwise, the only way to find out is Monarch Larva Monitoring Project has a citizen science program that anybody, you guys can join in. And what you do is you net the adult butterflies and you stick a sticker on their abdomen. It doesn't hurt them at all. And you put that sticker on a note card, you mail it into the program, and they have to look under a microscope to see if there are any spores. And so that's really the only way, unless you start seeing a lot of deformed butterflies. That's how I knew. It was about, what was it, 4 years ago? I think I had like 20 deformed adult monarchs emerge from chrysalis, and I knew that I had an OE infestation, and I cut down my entire way station.
And I guess you can't tell from the caterpillars, can you? It's
No.
just the adults.
if they're showing symptoms, if they're showing signs.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're still able to fly. They're just weaker. So it's a good citizen science project to get involved in. That's one of the things I do with my summer interns. It's also something that I did in my public events. We haven't been able to do any because of COVID. So hopefully next year COVID will kind of die down, fingers crossed, and we can start that back up again. And, you know, I teach people how to net butterflies properly, teach them how to tag them, because the only tagging season is the fall migration season right now. And then I teach everybody how to do the OE parasite testing and send it off to Project Larva Monitoring, the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project. So yeah, it's let me go into stratification because I don't want to take too long. This is something Brent and I were talking about before we logged on with you guys. Do you stratify your milkweed seeds? And what does stratify mean? It means that you cold shock the seeds, that you know, put the seeds in a cold environment like your refrigerator for 2 weeks or up to a month before you plant them. It's really interesting. Britt and I have found out through our different experiments that the unstratified seeds, the ones that we don't cold shock, are the ones that actually grow or emerge the most. So Brent, did you want to say anything about the 2 links I have in the slide?
So that was we have volunteers that come out every Wednesday and work in our greenhouse growing native plants. And I happened to get some native milkweed seeds back in the spring, so we decided to do a little experiment. And we have 2 species, the swamp milkweed and the butterfly milkweed. And we divided the seeds of each species in half, in cold stratified half for 30 days, and the other half we kept just at dry room temperature. And we planted everything at the same time to see if it made a difference. And actually our results are kind of surprising. One of the species, the butterfly milkweed, we didn't have any germination, and the swamp milkweed actually had higher germination with the non-stratified. So we weren't expecting those results, and kind of makes you think, well, what was it that we did that caused the butterfly milkweed not to germinate? Maybe the conditions in the greenhouse weren't right. Maybe there wasn't enough sun in there. It is kind of shady. There's a lot of trees around the greenhouse, so it doesn't get a whole lot of sun. Maybe it was too wet in there or too dry. So if y'all are interested, y'all can go to the Jesse Jones Park Volunteers YouTube channel and watch those videos. They're about 5 to 10 minutes each, something like that, and see what we did. And maybe you have some, insights that we didn't catch. And I'm going to send out this PDF of this presentation to everyone, so the links will be on there. And if you have any suggestions, you can let us know, or if you want to help us out on Wednesdays. I have another slide. Jennifer has another slide coming up with some information about our conservation team.
If you want to grow milkweed starting from seeds, when should you plant them? Honestly, in our area, because it's so warm year round, I just say plant them at any time. If you do plant them to where you're going to have the newly emerged milkweed for the spring migration, I would plant the seeds late November. And if there is cold weather coming in, make sure that you have the seeds planted in pots that you can drag into your garage or drag into an area that's protected during the cold weather, just to make sure that they have a higher, survivability. A question I was asked a lot a couple of years ago, can you use cuttings of milkweed? Because, certain plants you can cut and then you can, put in like a wet paper towel or stick it, in some water and it'll start growing new roots. I have not had any luck with milkweed cuttings at all. Fred, who is the president of SCES, who I'm under, he's done it and has had good success. So I really can't give an answer of yes or no. I can tell you that the tropical milkweed, if you try to do it with a cutting, it's more than likely going to die. If you have giant milkweed, which is also called broadleaf milkweed, those are excellent for cuttings. We had just a forest of cuttings at the greenhouse at Dennis Johnston of the giant, and they just exploded. So it really depends. And then I explained, whenever you go to a garden center, please ask for pesticide-free milkweed. Brent, do you know any other places? Because the only place I know is Plants for All Seasons that sold pesticide-free.
Maybe is it Buchanan's Native Plants down in Houston? I bought plants there before. I haven't bought milkweed there, but I bought some other native plants. I'm curious if they have pesticide-free milkweed.
Yeah, I think you just have to ask and be, just to make sure. Okay, so Jesse Jones has got an excellent website for a database that they've been procuring that shows all of the different milkweed that grows in the area. I'll show you a few of the things from their website, but here the top is the link. Texas Parks and Wildlife has an excellent PDF that goes through every single milkweed species that is found in the entire state of Texas. So that's a good resource as well. Okay, so let me move this down. Okay, so here is the biggie. This is the tropical milkweed. This is not native to Texas, but this is the one that you're gonna probably see the most of. As Brent showed you, it's got really nice broad leaves. This is the one with the higher levels of toxins in it. It usually has this very beautiful orange kind of burnt umber flowering to it, and the seeds, if you can see here where I have the fruit label, these are actually seed pods. Inside are the seeds that have the little filaments on them that help carry them in the wind. Oops. This is the swamp milkweed. Do you have white swamp, or do you know?
We have the Asclepias incarnata.
Okay, so this is Prentice. Swamp needs to have a bit more wet soil to it because, if it's swamp. So if you do plant swamp, make sure that you plant it in a soil that can retain a lot of moisture. Make sure you water it regularly. Tropical, you don't have to water as much. And tropical, I think, usually likes some more aerated soil. Okay. Butterfly milkweed is another found at Jesse Jones Park. This one is also native to Texas. This one, if you can see the leaves, they're a little bit thinner and pointier than a tropical milkweed leaf would be. Zyzotes, we have tons of zyzotes at Dennis Johnston. I can tell you right now, I've never seen a monarch lay an egg on it, and I've never seen a caterpillar on one. But we make sure to plant, because we try to keep a lot of the native things growing in the park. So we have a lot of zyzotes that we planted. This is the giant. This is one of them at Dennis Johnston. As you can tell, it grows to be about the size of a tree. It's huge. it will grow and grow and grow. It's got very, very broad leaves that are, the size of your hand. During the winter, when I go out to inspect the butterfly garden, this is the one that will have all the caterpillars on it. And it's because, all the other milkweed we cut back. And so this is the only one available for any stragglers. And I think not last year, but the year before, on one day when I went to do a count, on this one alone, I counted over 30 caterpillars. And this was in January. So this one's also native to Texas. And then how do you care for your milkweed? Well, I already explained that you need to cut back your milkweed during the winter, and this is to help, make sure, you're encouraging the monarchs, go home to Mexico, go over winter. Don't stick around. It is a perennial. It will grow back year after year. If we have a warm winter, you can basically see your milkweed just continue to grow throughout the winter. If you cut it back, it'll just spring right back up if we have a warm winter. And so that's what happened last year, because remember, we had that really warm snap right before the ice storm. And so my milkweed was 3 feet tall, and I had already cut it back. And then, of course, the ice storm came and it killed everything, and it took a little bit longer for it to reemerge. So usually it starts coming up in February, but I think mine, Brent, did this happen at Jesse Jones, that I didn't start seeing milkweed sprouts until like March?
Yeah, I can't recall. I wish I was out in the park more. I hear our forester and caretakers talk about it, but unfortunately I miss out on a lot of that stuff because I'm always at my desk. But that's a good question. I imagine probably it was the same. They probably got a little shock from that
Yeah.
freeze. If it was warm right before, they weren't expecting that.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so it took a little bit longer this year for my milkweed to come back up. One of the things, do not be, surprised if you start seeing a bunch of aphids and milkweed bugs on your milkweed. Aphids are those tiny little yellowy orange bugs that secrete a sticky little sap. They haven't been bad at all here for me this year. Last year they were horrible. And I just wound up cutting my milkweed back in midsummer because the aphids had made everything so sticky that the caterpillars couldn't eat the leaves. And so I just cut things back and let them, grow fresh, new leaves. Milkweed bugs were really bad last year. They haven't been this year. Again, I'm assuming because of the cold, it probably killed, a lot of things. And so these things are normal for you to find in your milkweed. Don't spray your milkweed with pesticides or anything to get rid of them. Just, let nature take its course. If it gets too bad, you can always cut things back because the milkweed will grow back very quickly. Just don't spray anything. If you overwater your milkweed, or we have a lot of rain and you start to see the leaves go yellow and fall off, that's the reason. It just means that they're getting too much water. And so if we've had a lot of rain, don't run your sprinkler systems or don't try to water the milkweed, until the soil has a chance to dry out, and then you can start re-watering again. If you are one of the people who loves, bringing the caterpillars inside, Brent, did you want to show? So like what Brent did with a little net enclosure behind him?
Yeah. So we have a big tropical milkweed plant right out behind the Nature Center. And I've been keeping an eye on it, looking for caterpillars lately. And a few days ago, I noticed that there were 6 big fat ones on there. They must be in their fifth instar. And they had eaten all the leaves on it. So I was able to go find a couple more milkweed plants and put them in pots. And I brought it. We have a little net here. I don't know. Can y'all see that okay behind me? And so I put the pot in there and let them crawl over it. And so far, 5 of them are doing the little J shape, getting ready to pupate. The other one's still eating. And I wanted to get the pot out, but one of them has formed its little J right on the zipper. So I can't open it, otherwise he might fall off. So, but I'm going to have this here in the Nature Center, and they'll be, if they're starting to do the J now, then they should form chrysalis within the next 3 days. And then they'll be in the chrysalis stage for about a week or so, or is it 2 weeks?
It depends on how warm it is inside the building. So expect between 9 to 14 days.
Okay. So yeah, so if y'all want to stop by and see what the chrysalis looks like up close, we'll have this out in the Nature Center. So y'all stop on by and get a close-up look. We had a couple visitors, I don't know if you noticed behind me, stopped by and they were sitting in here looking at them real closely. So I'll have that in the Nature Center for y'all if you want to stop by.
Oh,
Jennifer, we also have a question here.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a question. I see caterpillars on my milkweed, but rarely see any pupae. Is there anything I can do to help provide the caterpillars with a good spot to pupate?
You can, but they love to travel. They will crawl for a very long distance just to, you know, find a place to form their little J and make a chrysalis. Honestly, that's probably why you're not seeing them, is because they're just crawling a very long distance away. It's really rare to find them on the milkweed plant themselves. Sometimes it happens when the caterpillar decides that it just wants to continue eating, and then it kind of runs out of time, and it's like, oh, I've got to form my chrysalis now, and then it goes very quickly. Otherwise, you'll find monarch chrysalises in just far away from where your milkweed is. I had in my way station here, I had one crawl all the way up to the roof line, second story of the house, and I mean they'll just crawl and crawl and crawl. It's amazing. So yeah, it's you need to kind of hunt for the chrysalis if you're trying to find, if you're trying to find where they're going. They like having, I've noticed that they like having very flat places like this. So if you have a fence line, they'll create it underneath that board of the fence line. If your milkweed is near your house, look up on your eaves and the roof line, they'll be up there. I'm trying to think, what could you do? Yeah, I really, because I wouldn't build a structure. They would just bypass it and find something else.
So Linda said that she, back in August, had about 30 caterpillars on her plants, and they stripped everything off the plants. And so she ended up giving them a cucumber. I've heard that too. They'll eat cucumbers. Yes. So if you run out of milkweed, you can only do this when the caterpillar is in its late 5th instar stage. You can't do it in any other instar. It's when it's in its late 5th instar, right, like a few days before it goes into chrysalis. You can feed it cucumber or pumpkin, and it'll eat it. The pumpkin is a little bit more interesting because its frass, which is its poo, comes out orange and looks really interesting. Yeah, so she's right. You can use that, but you have to wait until they're in their late 5th instar. If you suspect OE and you are raising the caterpillars yourselves, you can create a 2% bleach solution to wash the leaves in
and of course once you wash them, you have to rinse them with water thoroughly and then pat them dry and make sure they're dry, but then you're able to feed them to the caterpillars if you need to. Here's a link here. It explains how to make the bleach solution if that's what you need to do. I'm trying to think. I think it said it wouldn't damage the egg, if I'm remembering correctly, that the 2% will not damage any eggs that are on the leaves, but don't quote me on that. It's been a couple of years since I've read the article from MLMP. And then one of the last things I want to talk about, so we've talked about the host plant for the monarch butterfly. Well, what do monarch butterflies like to nectar from? I can tell you in my area of Houston, it is lantana, sapphire showers, and butterfly bush. Those are the things that the monarchs just go nuts over in my way station. The lantana, the orangey yellow flowered lantana, is the one that they prefer, and I'm assuming it's because it looks like the flowers of a tropical milkweed plant. I have tried white lantana, I have tried yellow lantana, I have tried purple lantana, and not one single monarch butterfly will eat from those flowers. They will only eat from the ones that are orange and yellow. They love the sapphire showers. And then of course, if you have butterfly bush, you'll get tons of different butterflies, not just monarchs. During the spring though, it's recommended these top 5, which is prairie verbena, and of course your purple coneflower, your black-eyed Susans, your lantana, and the mealy blue sage. In the fall, monarchs tend to prefer a mist flower, which apparently is huge right now in Austin and San Antonio. Large numbers of monarchs are being spotted in mist flower fields out there and being reported to journey north. The shrubby boneset, the sunflower, let me move this over, the fall aster, and frostweed are recommended for fall flowering plants. And then this one here, the sapphire showers, it's also called the golden dewdrop. This is the one that the monarchs tend to go to fall migration. I don't ever see any spring migration monarchs on this at all. It's really weird how picky they are about the different flowers. This is what my summer interns, I had 2 summer interns this year. Because of COVID, unfortunately, they had to kind of do things on their own because we weren't able to, meet in groups. This is Darian, and that's Callum. Darian is actually a sophomore college, so she's been with me for a couple of years. She interns with me every summer. And then Callum is a 10th grader. He started when he was 9th grade. And so during COVID, I had to, create projects for them to do that they would be able to do at home or do by themselves. And so Callum worked on planting milkweed seeds. And then he would go out to the greenhouse at Dennis Johnston and he would help water the plants. Darian would go out to the garden and she would collect seeds. This is aquatic. We've got a good bed of aquatic milkweed growing, and so we're going to give Brent some of what we collected. And so she would go through and she would count how many milkweed plants we had. She would look at all the milkweeds. She would count all the eggs she found. She would count the caterpillars. She would classify what instar they were in. We gave her all the equipment she needed. She would net butterflies. She would test them for OE parasites. And then she also created these really, I'm going to send Brent one because it's about milkweed, but I had her creating lesson plans. We've got some awesome lesson plans and activities on our website. If you go to monarchpei.org, There is a link for lesson plans. We've got video, a cool video up of a caterpillar going into chrysalis. You can see the things Darian created. She's very talented. She's also an artist, and so she does all of the artwork for the worksheets and activities that she created. And then I will let Brent tell you about his guys.
All right, so every Wednesday morning we have our conservation team that comes out. We start about 8:30 and usually end about 11, 11:30, 12, just kind of, people kind of stay till they're finished, but we get seeds and cuttings, and we grow native plants in our greenhouse here at the park. And about half of those plants go and get planted around the park. And the other half we have, we started selling at our festivals here at the park. We sell them for like really cheap, like $1 each. We should probably charge a little bit more, but we're trying to, get the plants out there in the community. We love native plants, and we did have a pretty good group in the spring and summer, and then some of our volunteers went back to school this fall, and so they're not available on Wednesdays. But if anyone is looking for something to do on Wednesday mornings, just shoot me an email and let me know if you're interested. I try and send out an e-blast every week to our Wednesday conservation team to let them know what the projects are for that week. So we'd love to have you all out and helping us with our plant propagation. And you can learn a lot from our volunteers that are master naturalists and horticulturists, and I learn every week. I feel like I'm learning something new myself. So y'all, if you know anyone that's looking to volunteer, just give them my information and have them contact me.
Okay. Any questions? And you can unmute your microphone if you need to. You don't have to type it in the chat box.
I think they were asking a lot of questions throughout the presentation.
Yeah. So Brent's going to send everyone a PDF copy of this, so it'll have all the links in it that you can click on, and that is it. So I hope you guys learned a little bit more about monarch butterflies, about their life cycle, the importance of milkweed. If you have additional questions that pop into your head, feel free to email me or Brent at any time. You can contact me through email. You can contact me through the website. There's a contact link. And then Brent also has, I think your information was, yeah. And then Brent's information is here on one of the sides, so you can contact him as well. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we're still not able to hold public gatherings at Dennis Johnston. I'm really hoping that changes next year. We do have volunteers, but because of the restrictions we're under, we have to, we're working with Laura Medic, who is the head of Legacy Trees for Harris County Precinct 4. We've always worked closely with her anyway. She helps us out, we help her out. And so, if you want to volunteer at Dennis Johnston, let me know, and we can get you set up with one of Laura's groups, because Harris County Precinct 4 is doing public gatherings of small numbers of people, to help do things around the Spring Creek Greenway. And it can vary from tree planting to helping in the butterfly garden, to removing invasive species. So there's lots to do until we're, finally able to get back up and going. And if that happens, then be on the lookout, because from April until October, I hold a citizen science group once a month at Dennis Johnston about monarch butterflies. And, we go through and we do all the stuff that I do with my summer interns. We have a scavenger hunt that I prepare that's ready to go whenever we're able to get public, groups going again. Lots of different, we had a soil science program that's ready to go that we were getting ready to do, and then COVID hit. So we've got all of this stuff backlogged. And so as soon as, we're open again, just expect a lot of things to start, coming your way. Our volunteer program, we do the President's Volunteer Service Award. So for any volunteer hours you do, you are eligible for this award. Go to the website. It explains it a little bit better than I will be able to explain over Zoom, because it depends on your age group and how many hours you do, but the award is through Points of Light. I can't get it out, but there's if you accrue enough hours, and it's for any volunteer age 5 and older. So if you have kids and they're 5 and older, they can do it as well, as long as they accrue the hours that the award says that age group has got to accrue. It's this really big medal from the President of the United States. They get a letter from the President of the United States, whoever's in office at the time, and an award certificate. So it's a really nice program. So if anyone's interested, just let me know. Our calendar year just started October 1st. So if you do any volunteering with us and you do volunteering with Legacy Trees with Laura Medic between now and September 30th, and you accrue the hours that the award says for your age group, then you will get a PVSA award.
Jenny, Mr. Danielle, I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
I just simply adore butterflies, right? Is this something that you can like cultivate butterflies, or you just kind of have certain plants there to kind of, and hopefully they'll come around?
So are you wanting to attract butterflies, or are you wanting to actually raise them?
I mean, not necessarily raise them for business or anything, but I would like to see them more often.
So as long as you have milkweed growing, you will get monarchs. They're like milkweed homer. They will home right in. And I'm trying to think. Passion vine, if you want to see Gulf fritillaries, because Gulf fritillaries are huge in our area. Several different species, they're everywhere. Get some passion vine. I've got a huge cluster of passion vine, and I have had probably 200 Gulf fritillaries this summer come. It's been crazy. Milkweed for the monarchs. If you want the blue pipe vine swallowtail, you will want to get Brazilian or white veined pipe vine. Do not get the big pipe vine that has the very big broad leaves. You want the one that has the very tiny leaves. Mercer Botanical Garden has got an excellent grow. They've got it all over the place. So they get a lot of blue pipe vine swallowtail. For other swallowtails, for the giant, you need some type of citrus plant, like an orange or a lemon tree.
Oh, I have a lemon. Okay.
Yeah. What does sulfurs eat? Brad, do you know what sulfurs? I cannot remember what.
No, I don't.
It's some type of tree. We have it at Dennis Johnston, and I can't remember the name of it. The black swallowtail or the eastern swallowtail, you'll want to grow things like dill. So if you have herbs, dill and parsley.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For those two. I'm trying to think what else is popular here. Am I missing a butterfly? I'm trying to think of the ones that we see the most
And I
around.
see the most, yeah, the swallowtails, I see a lot around the park, and the sulfurs
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the Gulf fritillaries. That's what I see the most of.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I have enough here. I think I can start with that.
Yeah,
Go back.
and then definitely buy some lantana. If you buy lantana, you're going to get butterflies all over the place. But the monarchs prefer the orange and yellow lantana, and the buckeyes and the painted lays, I think, prefer purple.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm trying to think of what else I have around in the garden. Yeah, just as long as you have the host plant and you have some nectar plants that they can feed from, you're good. And you'll start seeing them. And if you want to raise them inside, and you don't have to raise them to sell them. A lot of people just like to bring them in, like Brent did with his, and just, you know, watch them. You can do that too. You'll need kind of like a net thing. If Brent wants to point to it again, you'll want to get like a net enclosure. If you don't want to have them creating chrysalises on the zipper part, leave that off and buy some wetting tool.
Okay.
And just drape the wetting tool over it and use binder clips to clip it to the top. Yeah, because that's what I would do with any caterpillar I found, particularly during Harvey. I set up like a hotel Harvey for caterpillars in my house, because I was afraid, you know, with all the flooding that it would, you know, kill them. And so I went and collected them and brought them all in. And so I had, you know, wetting tool containers everywhere, which was funny. But then I had to go out in the rain to get the milkweed leaves off the plant so that I could bring them in like 2 to 3 times a day to feed them, because they eat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think one caterpillar will eat over 30 leaves, but they don't just eat an entire leaf. They might eat like a tip of a leaf, and then they'll go on to another leaf.
Oh.
And so you're usually recommended, I think, for one monarch caterpillar, I would have at least 4 to 5 grown plants. Because they're nonstop garbage disposal. They just okay.
Okay. And Brent, the plant sale on November 13th, what time is that at?
10 to 4, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would suggest, you know, going, because Brent's milkweed, the Jesse Jones milkweed, is going to be pesticide free. So it's gonna, you can trust it.
I'll be there.
All right, any more questions? Okay.
They got a lot of good information today.
It's a
hopefully,
lot. Yeah.
hoping they all go home and take some of this knowledge and help us with our monarch conservation.
Yes. One thing I will say before I let you guys go, it is against the law to net butterflies and public property. So if you go to a park, don't try to catch the butterflies, you'll get in trouble. But if you're on your own property, your private property, then, you know, you can, you know, net the butterflies on your own property. Because I've seen several kids at Dennis Johnston Park come out with nets, and they're not allowed.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Jennifer for doing this for us again this year.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
I will send the PowerPoint, and also somebody asked about the recording. So what I'll do is I'll have to, I don't think I can email a file that large, but I'll get it uploaded somewhere and send you the link if anybody wants that. And if you have any questions, let me or Jennifer know. And I hope that y'all get to stop by the park soon. Nice to see y'all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.